Hi everyone, my name is Joseph and today I want to share some games that I recently picked up. One of these games should have been in the video where I've reacquired some PS3 games that I sold a long time ago, but I made the choice to pick up again because it's on my trophy list. But I made the choice to not share this specific game during with that video because I knew I was getting other games within this series. And in fact, one is noticing that this video is titled the Holy Grails, and that's in quotation marks. The reason why that's in quotation marks is just because I personally never had a holy grail per se. I always just bought games that I've wanted to play, and if I could get them physically, then I do. But if they've always been too expensive, when I say expensive, I mean over 150 bucks, I just make the choice not to. And I feel like, oh well, that ship has sailed. I'm good. I don't need to have that in my collection. I'm grateful that there's not too many games that are like that. For the most part, probably about 90% of my games that I've played in my library are physically represented with my physical games. Sorry, let me rephrase that. 90% of my digital games that I have in my digital library are physically represented within my physical library. Hopefully that came out a bit better. And yeah, and before I continue, I was I was really hesitant about getting back into this series just because I know there's a lot of fan service. But what convinced me to get into this is because of so Food for Dogs Brita. She explained how this series really helped her when she was in a bit of a funk. I don't want to speak for her, but it sounds like it was some mental health related, so depression and maybe. But again, I don't want to speak with her. If anyone wants more information, feel free to check out her video where she explains how she got into gaming. But yeah, she explained how this series really helped her because it was just a lot of fun, and the world and the setting that they presented allowed one to escape. And the game series that I'm talking about is Hyperdimension Neptunia. So I used to have the PS3 version a long time ago. I didn't get too far, and the reason why I didn't get too far is because for me, I've never been a big fan of fan service. I do watch some anime, but not too many. The amount of anime that I've seen could be counted in one hand. And I've probably seen the more popular anime. My favorite anime is Fullmetal Alchemist Brotherhood, and I have seen things like Death Note, and I just finished Attack on Titan. And of course Digimon, right? I'm a big Digimon fan. But when I think of anime, I think of like anime more aimed towards a young adult audience. I would say that the new Digimon iterations, such as Tri, Last Kuzina, and the most recent Digimon Adventure 2, the beginning, are aimed towards an older audience. But the original anime, I would argue that obviously it was not, right? But despite that, and I have read only a couple of manga. I'm invested in Berserk, for example. But despite that, again, I've never been a big fan of fan service, especially in manga or anime. A really good example about this would be in Seven Deadly Sins. The story was quite fun for the first season. The main character, Miliades, I believe his name is, he just had a habit of constantly touching the woman character, the female protagonist, his partner, in crime, not a romantic partner. And that was just like, what's the point of that, right? It's not needed, it's not necessary. And even if Fullmetal Alchemist Brotherhood, the only fan service moment I could think of is just when Rinri is taking a bath and there's a quick shot of her in the bathtub, but it's very tame compared to other elements. So that's why I didn't pick it up right away. And that's why I actually wasn't present with my other video where I showed off the games. Not showed off, that sounds negative, excuse me. Where I shared the games that I reacquired. But what made me decide to go ahead and put aside my misgivings about the series is again from Brita. She explained how it helped her, and I was thinking to myself, well, if an individual like Brita could see the positives about this game series despite the fan service, why can't I? And then what really convinced me is the fact that I was unaware about this. The individuals who make this game, it's mostly women. It's a woman-dominated team. And so that helped me to digest it a little bit better as well, just because if this was made by men, I'm not going to lie, the fan service just feels like, well, men acting a little bit pervert-ish a bit, right? But the fact that this was made by women, it's still a bit pervert-ish, right? But there's a reason why these women creators decided to make these women characters the way that they are in this game franchise, right? So that's what convinced me to buy it. And I'll be honest with everyone, the setting always did sound quite fun. In case anyone is unaware, the series is just about what if our game consoles were actually represented by personas or actual goddesses. And so PS3 has its own version, the Wii, the 360, Xbox, and so forth. Right? Well, actually, I'll just show it right here. To my understanding, this is the Xbox, the Wii, and then I believe This is the PlayStation 3, and then I forget what this one is at the bottom right. But before I continue forward, in case also one was unaware, if anyone wants to get into the series, so the reason also why this is called the Holy Grail is because these are some of these games are apparently quite difficult to get a hold of. But I got fortunate that I found either great priced new games or used games. I typically don't like to buy used. I only buy used when I have to. But thankfully, this used copy came in almost like new, I would say. I'm really happy with the quality of the case. But I'll specify which Holy Grail items I'm specifically talking about. But as I continue, before I continue forward, let me also explain. Anyone who's interested in the series, it's important to do some light research because this is a trilogy, the one that came out on the PS3, but it's also retcon. Because unfortunately, NIS America started working with other companies. They weren't able to renew a specific contract. So some characters that were introduced in this series are not present on the canon storyline, in the present storyline, in the present timeline that the story is, that the narration is following. So just be aware about that. If one wants to follow the canonical timeline, that series is available on the Vita and on PC. To my understanding, this is only available on PlayStation. So obviously I kind of gave it away already. I did get the sequels after this, so I also did pick up Hyperdimension Obsinia MK2. So that's what I have right here. I've heard that this game has the biggest, the first game and this one, the first one especially has the biggest. Oh, I'll get to that shortly. Excuse me, I'm jumping the gun. Sorry about that. So here's this one. I don't think I showed off the back for this one. Excuse me, not showed off, but shared. Oops. Excuse me, everyone. It's because I'm trying to maneuver around my cat. So here's the first one again, Hyperdimension Obsinia. And here's the back of it. Console patron units engage, protect game industry. So that's the continent, the world that they live in, game industry. My cat, excuse me, her little paws are trying to set it. Okay, so then here's Hyperdimension Obsinia MK2, the sequel. To my understanding, these are the representations of the DS units, so that's kind of cool. Peril and Game Industry CPU candidates assemble. And then here's the end of that trilogy, Hyperdimension Obsinia. So it says V, that's not 5, that V stands for victory. So weird naming convention, but that's what they chose to go with. So multidimensional CPUs transcend. That's what it says in the back. So now we're getting to the quote-unquote Holy Grail items. So these ones, again, I was quite fortunate to get all brand new, but the pricing was a little bit more than I typically am willing to pay. But since these are Vita games, that's also a factor that I took into consideration. So all of these were beneath 120, but they were above, around 100 and above 100. But the first one could probably guess, is Hyperdimension Neptunia Rebirth 1. So before I share the case about this, let me go back a little bit to what I was about to share. I was about to explain how if one is interested in the series, to do some light research. But I stopped discussing it just because I wanted to have the Vita be a quote-unquote surprise. But essentially, Rebirth 1 is a retelling, not a remaster, but a retelling of the first PS3 game. Since again, the company was forced to tell a new story since they couldn't reutilize some of the characters they introduced. They made the choice just to start the story over again. And so they made that decision with this one. So again, if anyone's interested, you have two options. You could either play the original trilogy, but that's no longer canon, or you could play the current canon story, which is available on the Vita and on PC. So this is the first one. And I'll explain what made me get both versions after we go through the other ones as well. So I did get the second one as well. Hyperdimension Obsinia Rebirth 2, Sisters and Generations. So as one could see, right, so those are the characters that were in the, let me go ahead and share it. The other one over here in the PS3 version. Oops, and then let me read the back for this one. Take part in a war between goddesses, now on PlayStation Vita system. This is the sequel again. Let's look at the back. Step aside, sister. It's time for the CPU candidate to save game industry. And then Hyperdimension Atonia Rebirth V Generation. So again, that V convention is still in the name. And obviously this is a remake of the third one in the series, in the franchise. It's time to nep, like it's 1989. That's what it says in the back of this game. And so, even though these are retellings, the reason why I decided to get the PS3 versions as well, I got the Vita version first, and then I made the choice to get the PS3 versions, is because the first two in the franchise, the story is quite different from the Vita version. And the Vita does make references to the original series as well. It's very meta. It talks to the audience. It breaks the fourth wall. Oh, does it break the fourth wall? Not really breaks the fourth wall, excuse me, but it is meta. It makes a commentary on itself about that it's a game series. And so the first one is quite a lot. There's a lot of differences with the first one compared to the PS3 version, and that's also true for the second one, and the second one for the PS3. There are some differences, not as many differences with the first one, but enough differences to make a difference. Excuse me, I don't like to use enough of significant change to make a difference. There you go. Apparently, there's this one character who's very sexualized in a very creepy sort of way. He's not in the Rebirth version, so that's an aspect they decided to remove. A lot of fans were happy about that. And then I've heard that the Rebirth 3 there's not too many differences. In fact, it's practically 1-for-1, except for maybe a couple of different characters. I say maybe because I can't recall 100%, but I do know that Rebirth 3 compared to Victory on the PS3, again, it has the fewest changes. So I might not be playing the PS3 version of the third one just because of that. But who knows? Maybe I'm wrong about that. So yeah, so again, the Holy Grail elements in this video are the Vita games. And again, for me personally, I never really had a Holy Grail item per se, a game I was chasing. But I guess if I really stopped and thought about it hard, long enough, one franchise that I suppose would be like that for me is the Legend of Heroes series on the PSP, so Tears of Vermilion, I believe it's called. I really do want to get that for my PSP, even though it's not directly connected to the Legend of Heroes, the current telling of the story of it. So with Charles of Cold Steel, Charles in the Sky, and the Crossbell, and now the most recent new Calvard arc. I can't recall the name, person, excuse me. But they're quite expensive, even when they're used. And again, I'm not typically a big fan of buying things used. If it's going to be used, I like it to be as close to like new status as it can be. And obviously, if I want to go for that, they're all really, they're not cheap games to purchase, unfortunately. Especially that third one. The third one, last I checked, is almost the same price as the first two together. Another game that I suppose would be a holy grail for me would be the Legend of Heroes Trials of Cold Steel 3, the limited edition for my PS4. Unfortunately, I was not yet collecting limited editions. I was unaware about that. I didn't get into the fourth game in the series, Code Steel 4. And if I could go back in time, I would love to get that box. The nice thing that I keep in mind is that Code Steel 3 box, it's quite bigger than the Code Steel 4 and the Crossbell Duology limited editions and the Charles into Rivalry as well. Those limited edition boxes I really like them. They're not big. They're still compact. And they hold a lot of awesome items in the inside, special bonus items. That first Code Steel 3, I think they were still working out the kinks because the box it's more boxy. It's more of a box shape, and I guess that makes sense because the Code Steel 3 limited edition had a plushie that came with it. But yeah, so I guess those would be my Holy Grail items. There's actually a couple more Holy Grail quote unquote items that I might be getting. Again, for me right now, that definition is for any game that's over $100. I typically, if it's over $150, I will not pay for that. But for special considerations, again, none of these games here were over $130 or $120, I believe. It was all just hovering around the $100 mark. But again, that's typically quite expensive for me. I typically will not do that, but I made the choice to do that. And oops, sorry, I'm trying to list them all out one by one, but my cat is making it a bit difficult. And also, I won't lie, I'm ungainly with my hands. But as a Vita owner, and I do really love my Vita, I knew that I really wanted to represent this physically in my collection. And so there might be another Holy Grails video coming out if I do decide to purchase these other items. I'm not sharing which game specifically it is, just because again I want it to be a quote unquote surprise. But yeah, so this is the my first Holy Grail items. Although at first it was a little bit hurtful to pull the trigger, and in the long run I am quite happy to have these in my collection. Just because again I'm a big fan of physical games in my library. But before we end it, that was the end of the Holy Grail section. We're going to shift back over to regular games now. And so if anyone's interested in the canon story, you can follow the Vita games Rebirth 1, Rebirth 2, Rebirth 3. Again, it's available on the Vita or on the PC or Steam. And one could also follow the fourth game in the series, which is known as Mega Dimension Neptunia V2. So again, it's not saying the fifth entry, it's not busting Final Fantasy X2 here. This is actually the fourth game of the series. It's the sequel to Victory. So the V stands for Victory. There are two versions of this. If one is unaware, there's this version and also a Mega Dimension Neptunia V2R. And apparently the V2R, the frame rate is not as high, and the battle system is slightly different. And obviously there's VR elements. So that's something that one should keep in mind if they're interested in getting into this series. I personally probably won't be getting the VR2. Or if I do, I'm fine just getting it digitally. I don't need the physical version because I have this to represent that, right? But yeah, again, so I had some reservations getting back into this series from the get-go. In fact, from the beginning, I was planning on just getting the PS3 Hyperdimension Neptunia, and that's it, since I had that on my trophy list. But at the end, I decided to, I made the choice to get the Rebirth 1 digitally on my Vita, just to see if I would actually play it, if I would actually finish it. And I was happy to say that I was enjoying my time. I haven't finished it yet, but from what I have played, I was enjoying my times with it for sure. But yeah, so that's essentially the end of this video. If you guys have any Holy Grail items that you are seeking for, or that you recently bought, please feel free to share that with me. I'll be interested to hear that. Thank you so much for watching. I do appreciate it. I'll see you in the next video, and take care.